This is a conversation with Sahil Bloom. He's a writer, content creator, and entrepreneur, popularly known for his insights in the Curiosity Chronicle newsletter and the author of the book, The 5 Types of Wealth. In this conversation, we discuss the 5 types of wealth. We talk about time wealth, social wealth, physical wealth, mental wealth, and financial wealth. We talk about using the wrong metrics, the wrong scoreboard for measuring a successful life. We talk about Sahil's personal journey, and then some frameworks, routines, and protocols that everyone can use for living a life full of value and impact. This is no time. If you like what you see, then do hit subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, rate 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. This project takes a lot of my time, money, and efforts. If you'd like to see it continue, do consider making a donation on Patreon or Anchor or Instagram. You can buy super thanks on YouTube. You can leave a gift on Instagram Reels, or you can join as a member on YouTube. If not through monetary channels, then do consider sharing these episodes, leaving your likes and comments, all forms of engagement. They really go a long way. For the forms of love and support, you can follow this channel on Instagram or Twitter, or follow me personally. And now, it is no time. Guy Lombardo had once famously said, "Enjoy yourself. It's later than you think. Enjoy yourself while you're still in the pink. The years go by as quickly as you wink. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy yourself. It's later than you think." Your life changed after you had a conversation with a friend in a bar when he told you that if you continue meeting your parents once a year, you're probably going to see them only 15 more times in your life. And that was this cornerstone event in your life from which point you started reinventing yourself completely. I want to start here. I want to start talking about the value of time first. I don't have the poll numbers. I'm going to go out on a limb here and put my neck on the line and say most people, myself included, we're quite flippant with our time. We spend time on things that we think are important, but many people later in life realize that they probably had reallocated, they need to reallocate their priorities, that wasted time doing things that were not as important. Let's start here. Talk about the moment of realization when you had the conversation with a friend, when you realized the value of time, and how can people shift their perspective, view time as a form of wealth, and become a time billionaire, so to speak.
Yeah, this concept of the time billionaire is a really important and central one to the book and to your life. It comes from an investor named Graham Duncan, who I think first referenced it on an episode of the Tim Ferriss Show podcast. And when I spoke to Graham, what he talked about was that he runs a big investment firm and he interviews hundreds of people, hundreds of young people that are all interested in getting into the investment world. And what he said was that they all want to become billionaires. That's their goal. They're like, oh yeah, I want to make a ton of money. I want to become a billionaire. Yeah. And he had this realization one day that they're all young and they relate to themselves as people who want to become billionaires, but they are already billionaires in one important way, which is they are time billionaires. They literally have over 1 billion seconds left in their lives. If you do the math, 1 million seconds is about 11 days. 1 billion seconds is about 30 years. Which is just like a crazy thing with math that you don't think about. It's like they feel like they're close, but they're not anywhere close. 11 days versus 30 years. So when you're 20 years old, if you're listening to this and you're in your 20s, you literally have 2 billion seconds left in your life on average. But you don't relate to time in that way. You're not actually relating to thinking about it as your most precious asset. The thing that always brings it to mind for me is like this idea of ask someone, would you trade lives with Warren Buffett? He's worth $130 billion. But I'm willing to bet you would not trade lives with him if you really thought about it, because he's 95 years old. You would never trade the time you have left for all the money that he has. And the inverse, he would probably trade all 130 billion of his dollars to have the time that you have left. So that reminds you, it's a visceral reminder that time really is the most important, it's the most precious asset that you have. And it's the only asset that really matters. And unfortunately, we have this and kind of live in this like paradox of time almost, where you don't think about time until it's too late. And then it's the only thing you think about. And so in my own life, that story you tell of hearing the number of times, the number of moments I had left with my family, that was this visceral reminder that snapped me back into the present, reminded me that if I kept on living the way I was living, I was going to wake up one day and say, what the fuck just happened?
While we're talking about time and also brought your family into the mix, I want to indulge in a bit of time travel, go back to your childhood. your family is a family of overachievers. Your father is a tenured professor at Harvard University in economics and demography. Your mother is a founder and CEO. Your sister is this overachiever. And you, these are your words, not mine, were this ne'er-do-well student only interested in baseball. You've said in the past that you were quite insecure, jealous of your sister in particular as well. You often talk about living a life by design as compared to a life by default. When you look back now, how much of your personality today, this quest, this hunger for curiosity, for growth, for reinventing yourself, you've said in your book, you obsess over challenges, you push yourself quite often. How much of this aspect of your personality do you think is not a result of design, but rather defaulted by the simple fact that you were born into a family of overachievers?
I think you absorb a lot of what you see in your early years of your life. Okay. That being said, I really believe that kids come out with a kit. Jerry Seinfeld said this once, that part of being a comedian and being really funny is also having this like very sad, depressive streak. And he believes it's part of the kit that you come with. And I really, now being a father, I really think there's a lot that you're just born with in your natural disposition and the way that you engage with the world. And I think I was just born with a kit that allows me to be very almost psychotic in my pursuit of the thing that I'm excited about, the thing that I'm focused on, and really delay gratification in a meaningful way in the pursuit of it. And that has really played out in a number of ways in my life over the years. But I think you either have that or you don't. And if you don't have that, you're kind of working to maneuver towards that world of delayed gratification, of discipline, of driving yourself towards things that matter. But if you do have it, you can really harness it, or it can really go awry. Yeah. You can, really fall off the rails, or it can lead you down this like obsessive path where you lose sight of everything else. That obsessive path where I lost sight of everything else was the life I was marching towards. That was the chase for money. That was my desire to be successful and make myself feel good and mask my own insecurities, while I just narrowly focused on money as the definition of success and on what would give me the good life that I wanted. Unfortunately, because of that, everything else was falling apart. I was chasing this castle in the air while everything else around me was sort of crumbling. The, relationship with my parents, who I was never seeing, my relationship with my sister, which had really suffered, my relationship with my wife, I wasn't present with. We were having our own struggles. My health, I was drinking all the time. All these other things were crumbling while I was so narrowly focused on finding this, false idol definition of success.
Yeah, I find it so interesting. I can definitely resonate. So I'm the younger brother. And when I was growing up as well, I always used to look up to an elder brother, because the age gap was it was just 3 years. It was always felt achievable, but he was always a mile ahead of me in terms of intelligence, wit, charm. And that type of, I guess, insecurity also drove me for to always continue to read. I'm sure it shaped my personality quite a bit. You've shared a very interesting story from your past. Your mother's an Indian immigrant. Your father's Jewish. Your father's side of the family didn't accept the marriage, so he ended up walking out on that side of the family. And you've said that, you said something interesting in the previous interview. You said that probably that might be one reason why he was super supportive. Of course, he was always going to be supportive and a loving parent, but given the context and the sacrifices he made, he ended up being even extra supportive, maybe giving 110% instead of 100%. Do you think these, like, I just love like the butterfly effect of decisions like these. Do you think this is another component that added to that kid that resulted in that life by default, this nature versus nurture question we're talking about, that this one event in his life shaped your personality as well because of all the care and concern, the extra support you received?
Yeah. I mean, I think my parents' decision to question common convention has been something that has been sort of infused into the DNA of my family. And my sister and I grew up in a household where we knew that our parents had chosen love above what was the common convention, the cultural standard of what their families had wanted. Yeah. And even my mom's own rebellion to decide to apply to school in the US in secret, to come to the United States, to start a life here, all of those things, those tiny acts of rebellion or large acts of rebellion are sort of instilling like family values, right? That get passed down. And I do feel like my natural disposition as a result was to question those defaults, question those default settings that are handed down to me. And it was a journey to uncover that, right? Like I spent the first 30 years of my life deeply insecure. And it's sort of crazy to even vocalize that, because I had achieved a lot and I had done quite a lot. And I was, from the outside looking in, I was quite successful, and I got into a great school. Like all of the things that you think you're supposed to do to be successful, to feel good about yourself, I had done. And unfortunately, insecurity is such that if you don't feel good, there's no amount of external affirmation that can fix that insecurity. And I thought it could. I knew I was insecure, but I thought that from having other people tell me that I was great, that one day I would wake up and feel great. And my path to that was going to be making a lot of money, being powerful, doing these things. And so I kept marching towards that. I made the decisions that made me feel or sound impressive. And eventually it got to the point that I just realized if I kept on living the way I was living, I was going to end up in a place that I didn't want to end up. And something needed to change. I mean, you cannot fix an internal problem with external solutions. You have to turn inward.
You've also mentioned something very interesting about this insecurity, this jealousy you felt in your childhood, that you built up this wall against your sister. And you said something that you finally met your sister after 30 years, after both of you became parents, after you both had children. What changed? What was it about having a child that rekindled your relationship with your sister?
Yeah, that was a really emotional part of the book for me, even just articulating that. I spent most of my childhood resenting my sister. She's my older sibling, 3.5 years older than me. And she was like the golden child. She did everything that my parents wanted from us. She performed extraordinarily well academically. She got into the best schools. She studied hard. She got the best grades, all of these things. And, I would go to school and I would have a teacher, and the teacher would be like, "Oh, you're Sonali's brother." And then inevitably within a week, they would be disappointed and realize that I was not up to the same standard that my sister was. And it created this feeling of competition and this feeling of resentment that I had towards her that was completely unfounded, and it was grounded in my own insecurity about who I was. I started convincing myself that I wasn't the smart one. She was the smart one, and I was going to be the athletic one. And it was just a fundamentally incorrect story that I told myself, and created this tension, this dynamic. Fast forward to, only just recently, when a little after I turned 30, my sister had her son, a little boy. 11 months later, we had our first child. And it was the first time in our lives that my sister and I were in the same stage of life. Like previously, it had always been like she was going to college, I was in high school, or she was working, I was in college. Yeah. We were never in the same phase of life. And suddenly we had this moment, this thing that we were connected around. Like we could truly see each other. And so what I wrote in the book is it was as if we met for the first time. It took us 30 years, and then we truly met. We were really peers for the first time. And the blossoming of that relationship as siblings has been one of the most beautiful things in my life over the last several years, to just realize that we can truly be there for each other and see each other as real people, not as this kind of competitive brother-sister dynamic. And I think there's just so many people out there that feel that have that kind of under the surface tension or competitiveness with a sibling. And really what it required was me swallowing my own pride and vocalizing that and saying to my sister how proud I am of her, as a professional, as a mother, all of the things that I think she's accomplishing, and I'm really apologizing for the dynamic that I felt I created through my own insecurities in my life.
I can definitely resonate with that. Like I mentioned, I used to also look up to my brother, but now over time, this age gap of 3 years that used to mean that you're in different phases of life, now it doesn't mean as much. That dissolves over time because you start entering as an adult into similar phases. Completely resonate with it. I took these digressions. We were talking about time wealth and the value of time. You have proposed time as a form of wealth along with 4 other types of wealth in your book. But before we define those, I just want to linger on the problem a bit more. I want to define the problem statement. You make the case that most people, once again, I don't have the poll numbers, but most people, myself included, we have the wrong metrics or the wrong KPIs, the wrong scoreboard for measuring what is a successful life. If you ask people today, most of them would say, I guess a good marker of a successful life is how much I'm earning or what position I have in the company that I work in, right? So it's a very professionally driven and financially driven decision. What is the problem with this approach? Why are these metrics wrong? Why is this the wrong scoreboard?
So there's this famous quote, Peter Drucker, management theorist, says that what gets measured gets managed. And what it means is that the thing that you can easily measure ends up being the thing that you manage. It's the thing you optimize around. Money is the metric that people measure because it's so easily measured. It's a single number, right? It's very easy to put your entire worth into a single number. As a result, it's the single thing that we try to optimize around. It's the single thing that we focus on because you can see it, you can track it, you can see it going up. So from a definition of success, from a definition of your life worth, it becomes very easy. And as a result, everyone is focused on it. And we measure ourselves against each other, against ourselves. All of these things, these dynamics get created. Turns out it's actually not a very good measure for what you are trying to build in your life, which is fulfillment, which is happiness, which is contentment, which is really things that are much more dynamic than money. We know this, right? If you look at the Forbes top 10 richest people in the world, they have 13 divorces among them. Top 10 people in the world, 13 divorces, right? That is not what I want to build in my life.
Yeah.
I don't know how many of their children dislike them or don't want to spend time with them. There's a lot of things that matter much more than having money. I know way too many rich people that are entirely miserable. And that's not what I want out of my life. So it turns out that money is not actually the definition of success. Your version of success may involve money, and it probably will to some extent. But what really matters in addition are all of these other things. There are these other types of wealth. It's the time, your freedom. It's your social wealth, your connection to your children, to your partner, to your friends, your communities around you. It's your mental wealth, your ability to have purpose, meaning, to create space in your life. It's your physical wealth. It's your ability to feel healthy and vital, because what good is life if you don't feel that way? So all of these other things need to work in concert, and we need a way to measure them in the same way that we measure money.
Let's dive deep into it. I love everything you just brought up. You alluded to the arrival fallacy or the growth paradox. Many people assign a certain deadline in their life where if you reach a certain level, that's when everything's going to fit into place. But when they reach that level, it's a hedonic treadmill, right? You then want to move on to the next big thing. You want more and more and more. You're this hamster in a wheel. You sum this up perfectly in your book by quoting this verse from the poem by John de La Fontaine, where he says, "How many folks in country and in town neglect the principle of fair, and let for want of due repair a real house fall down to build a castle in the air." In your book, The 5 Types of Wealth, you make the case that money is, of course, important, but that shouldn't be the only thing. There are 5 different types of wealth that you should holistically build up. So let's start addressing all of them one by one. We've already started talking about time wealth. So let's close the loop on that. Let's formally define that first. What is time wealth? What are some routines, frameworks that people can start implementing to accumulate that over time?
Yeah, so time wealth simply is your ability to spend your time on the things that matter to you. Yeah. It's who you spend it with. It's how you spend it. It's having the freedom to control your time. That is what time wealth is. It's an awareness of the impermanence of time. We talk about being a time billionaire. We talk about how much that matters. That awareness is fundamentally what that comes down to. And in terms of engaging in that and building that in your life, I think the first step is to recognize how you're currently spending your time. And are you spending it well and wisely, or are you spending it on things that are not a particularly good use of it? Because the easiest thing to do is to just default into whatever you're currently doing. And if you were to actually track and manage your time during the course of a week, you would immediately get a pretty good perspective on where am I really getting energy out of the time I'm spending, and where am I seeing energy draining? Where am I seeing that I'm spending time on activities that are really crushing me? Either the people that I'm with, or the things that I'm doing, or the work that I'm doing. Where am I actually feeling these ups, and where am I feeling these big downs? And if you can slowly make changes to your life to spend more time on the things that are energy creating and less time on the things that are energy draining, you find an immediate improvement to your life. And in general, the things that create energy in your life tend to be the things that have higher returns. They have higher upside, and whether it's financial or otherwise, they create more value in your life.
Just by building that awareness about how you're spending your time can really help you start moving in the right direction. You also bring up a very interesting law in your book called Parkinson's Law, where work expands to fill up the time you allot for it. So if there's a task that would only take 30 minutes and you assign 2 hours for it, you will end up finishing in 2 hours because you'll procrastinate. Yes. I find that very interesting.
It's very true too. Anyone that has spent time emailing knows this. If you give yourself 2 hours to email, you take 2 hours to email. If you give yourself 30 minutes, you get it all done in 30 minutes.
A magical theory. The moment you realize it, suddenly you start noticing all this free time that you can actually start filling up in your own schedule. Let's move to the second one. Let's talk about social wealth. What is social wealth? And once again, what frameworks, routines can you implement?
So social wealth is what it sounds like, which is your relationships. It's the breadth and depth of your relationships with the people around you. The other piece to social wealth, which is easy to overlook, is just the idea of status. And I think it's arguably the most interesting part of social wealth that I address in the book. Yeah. Social status is an important natural phenomenon. It exists in monkeys just as much as it exists in humans. We look to find where we fit into a social circle. Like, where do we sit in that hierarchy? And the kind of original way that was displayed was through physicality. It was through like being bigger, kind of ancestral chest pounding. Now, in the modern world, money has become the proxy for status. And so the version of ancestral chest pounding is like having a fancy watch or a fancy car or a fancy house. Really, what status comes down to is this desire for respect and admiration of your peers. You're looking to be respected and to be admired by the people around you so that you can be elevated in a position in society. Mm-hmm. The thing that people get wrong and where people are spending too much energy and too much of their money is they're trying to buy that status. You're trying to buy respect and admiration. So I buy the fancy watch thinking that you're going to be so impressed by me, or I buy the car thinking that the people that see me drive by are going to be so in awe of who I am. The reality is that doesn't really work, because what people really do, which Morgan Housel has written about in the past, is they imagine themselves wearing that watch, or they imagine themselves in that car. Rather than thinking, oh, how cool is that person wearing that watch? They think about themselves. So those things, that bought status, as I talk about it, is really quite fleeting. It doesn't really work. What works is the things that you have to earn. It's actually earning status, which are things that are lasting. It's things like having a great marriage, having a great relationship with your children. It's building a real business, building something of substance. That bestows upon you the status that you actually desire, that creates that feeling of respect and admiration that lasts.
And you also point out some really interesting routines, protocols that people start following in their lives that would help you build this social wealth. One was a life dinner that I really like, where you try to schedule a conversation with someone who's close to your partner, member of your family, and have this conversation around where you're heading, your values, your long-term goals, the macro objectives, rather than the normal small talk that you usually would have. And having this structured conversation can really help solidify your relationship and align both of you and see where you're both heading, whether you're evolving in the right direction. I found that very useful. There's another framework where you mentioned the held, heard, or hugged framework. You try to identify what role you're going to be playing in someone's life, and that would really help your relationships as well. While we're talking about social wealth, I have to ask you a follow-up. There is an accepted trajectory or a conventional trajectory you're supposed to take if you want to have status, which you brought up. And I'll explain what I mean. If you're someone in your late 20s or early 30s, there's an expected lifestyle that you're supposed to live. And it could be something like you go into work every day, you come home, you watch the TV show that's trending. On the weekends, you grab a drink with your friends at the bar, you go on a night out. Sundays, you're hungover, you're going to do laundry, you're going to catch up on the TV show, back to work on Monday. And the moment you start implementing these frameworks you brought up, and the ones we'll talk about, physical wealth as well, when you start implementing these frameworks, you will enter a phase where you will be termed boring by a few people. So that would mean going to bed early, having a fixed routine, waking up early, focusing more on physical wealth, working out consistently, eating healthy, not eating out as much. It would mean cutting down on alcohol intake. It would also mean going to the bar less often with your friends as well. Maybe not going for that many night outs, because you see that every time you go for a night, it not just affects that night, it affects the next morning as well and your productivity in the next morning. When you start implementing all these routines, your social wealth does take a hit and you enter into this phase known as the lonely chapter. Chris Williamson has popularized this quite a bit as well. Is this something you felt? Is this a challenge that people might face? Because we completely agree, having social connections is very important. It's been proven to help longevity, your physical and mental wealth. Both are linked to having good social connect, friends and family, a support group around you. But is there a challenge of entering this local minimum where there will be a phase where this friend circle that you identify with and a lifestyle you identify with, you're going to move away from it because you're changing and you might not be at the bar every evening to meet your friends. And you haven't found this new set of friends that you identify this new lifestyle with. Is that a challenging line to walk?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, that's the pillars of social wealth, if you will, are breadth, which is kind of the breadth of that circle, depth, which is the connection to a few people, and then the earned status that I talk about. And the important point when you think about the lonely chapter is recognizing that your breadth may take a hit, but your depth can remain and actually go stronger. What I have always found is that yes, loneliness is sort of a tax that you pay on personal transformation. When you are creating change in your life, you are going to experience a period of loneliness because you are changing your environment. You're changing all of the things about how you operate, and you no longer well suited to the prior environment that you operated in or the prior people that you operated with. Some of them will fall by the wayside. And you have not attracted the new people into your world that resonate with these new values, with this new style of life. Right. And that ends up being this gap. There's this gap between when you kind of exit the prior environment, when you found your new one. Yeah. The point as you go through that is to recognize that you can remain deep with the few while you still haven't found the many. Yeah. You kind of remain deep with those core set of people, those relationships, whether it's family, whether it's a couple of super close friends that you can stay close with and to help you navigate that transition as you move from one to the other. The other thing you find as you get older is you don't need 100 friends. I mean, when I was young, I wanted to be liked by everybody. Yeah. And being liked, a lot of people will like you if you say yes to everything, if you have no boundaries, if you're easy, if you let things slide. A lot of people will like you. The people that love you, your real ones, will love you when you do the opposite of all those things. When you say no more often, when you protect your own boundaries, when you have the hard conversations, those are the people you actually want in your life. You don't need the hundreds of people liking you. You need the few people that really love you, that appreciate it when you protect yourself.
Very interesting. And I love your insights on the breadth versus depth dynamic. And of course, the tax that you pay, loneliness is the tax that you pay on building a personal brand. I just love it. Let's move to the next one. Let's move to mental wealth. Ralph Waldo Emerson had once said that money often costs too much. And one interpretation I've taken of that is, you brought this up earlier as well, money is often viewed as this absolute number, this metric for success. But many people fail to discount the premium they're paying in terms of mental health in particular. Let's emphasize this as well. What is mental wealth, and what are some protocols, frameworks people can implement to start accumulating mental wealth?
Yeah. So mental wealth is a combination of a few things. It's your purpose, meaning, ability to sort of engage with your curiosity, to find those things, to achieve growth, to have that growth mindset, to continue growing and changing and building and being dynamic. And then importantly, it's your ability to create space in your life. And the term space is an important one. Viktor Frankl once wrote that between stimulus and response, there's a space. So between the things that come in and the things that go out, your response to them, there's a space. Yeah. Your power exists in that space because that is where your ability to choose your response exists. You no longer have to just be immediately reactive. You create a space in between. For some people, that space is created through meditation. For some people, it may be through prayer, through a religious practice. For some people, through walking. For some people, through just silence and solitude. The important point is that you find your space ritual. You find your ability to create that space in your life. It doesn't really matter how you create it, but you need it because it's essential to your mental health. It's also essential to your ability to just cultivate a thoughtful response to whatever it is that the stimulus is. And most of us, especially young people, live in this world where being busy, having constant stimulus and constant reactions to that stimulus is the standard. It's the way that people want you to live. You need to find a way to create that space. John Rockefeller was famous for kind of just like milling about in his garden during the day. He wasn't like listening to podcasts or reading books or doing whatever. He was just walking around just in his own head. That was his way of creating space. We need to find our own version of Rockefeller's garden, create that space in your life to cultivate that life of mental wealth.
Yeah, find your garden. Also a very powerful idea about finding your space by Viktor Frankl. His book, Man's Search for Meaning, has been one of the most powerful books I've read. Also, while you were talking about finding your garden, I just remembered randomly, Al Pacino has often gone on record and said that when he was coming up with the role for The Godfather, he used to just walk all the way from Upper West down to the village and then back again, just thinking about the role and just letting it be. And that really helped him craft the role. He did that for multiple weeks. And that was how he created that iconic character.
I mean, walking, there's scientific research to support this. Walking creates and fosters creativity. I think at Stanford, they did a study that showed that walking increased creative thinking by 60 or 70%.
Wow.
Right? It's like a completely free pill to enhance creativity. Everyone's all focused on like wanting to be more creative. Just go for a walk.
I'm going to give this recommendation to the SNL writers who always cooped up in Rockefeller Center. Find them all walking down the street, just
There you
brainstorming. That's the way to do it.
There you go.
Let's move to the next one. Let's talk about physical wealth. What is physical wealth and how do you accumulate that over time?
Yeah. Physical wealth is simply your health and vitality. It is your ability to engage with kind of controllable factors to create a life where you feel good on a daily basis. And it's obviously relative to your age over the course of your life because it's the most natural. I call it naturally entropic. Like it's naturally going to decay over the course of your life because of the way that time and age works. But your ability to manage the controllables along the path so that you can cultivate a life of physical wealth is essential because it's very hard to enjoy any of the other types of wealth if your body does not feel good, if your body cannot move in the way that it used to. Yeah. The challenge with physical wealth for a lot of people is that they say later, right? They're like, well, I'm going to worry about my health later. I'll focus on this later.
Yep.
Life is filled with those laters. And later is really just another word for never in most cases, because you are not going to have your health in the same way later. If you don't invest in it now, you can't just invest on an infinite time horizon. Those investments need to be made now. The important point that I try to get across in the book is it doesn't have to be Herculean effort. You know, we live in this world where like fancy, sexy solutions are the standard. And that's what's sold to us on social media. That's what gets clicks. So if you take a video game analogy, you might be on level 1, but all you're being shown is level 100. And that's really intimidating for a lot of people. They think that what they need to do to become healthy is cold plunge for 5 minutes a day, sauna in the evening, run sprints this day, hit protocols this day, lift 4 times a week. Like they think that that's what health is. That might be level 100. You're on level 1. All you need to worry about is move your body for 30 minutes a day. That's it. And there's simple pillars to physical wealth: movement, nutrition, recovery. Within each of those, there's a level 1 where you just need to start and nail the boring basics, and you'll be 80% of the way there by just doing the simplest, basic, boring stuff. Then you can think about what's the next level. How do you continue to graduate up? But allowing yourself to kind of fall into the trap of chasing that like perfect optimal solution when you haven't nailed the simple, boring version is a really challenging thing that a lot of people run into.
There's no reason to become Brian Johnson from day one itself. Just start making smaller changes as you move.
And those things like Brian or Andrew Huberman or Peter Attia, they're very important because they're expanding the Overton window. They're helping people realize how important these things are. But you don't need to try to be them on your day 1. You don't need to compare your day 1 to their day 1,000. All you need to do is focus on nailing the basics, and then you can work your way up from there.
Yeah, I agree, completely agree. I feel like on a week-by-week basis, so I just consumed one episode by Andrew Huberman or Peter Attia. I was just able to implement them slowly at a time, and all of those compounded over time. Let's move to the last one, financial wealth. We diss this quite a bit, only because people often place a much higher priority on this than the others. And this requires a recalibration or reallocating your priorities. But let's talk about financial wealth. Of course, it's important. How can people shift their perspective and approach a much healthier outlook on financial wealth?
Yeah, I mean, the research around financial wealth is quite clear at this point, which is financial wealth, money, does buy happiness up to a point. Now, people argue over what that point is. The challenge with establishing what that point is that it is applying an average to a broad swath of people. And you can't really do that. It's sort of like you should never cross a river if it's 4 feet on average, because at some point it's going to be much deeper. It's going to be much more shallow. You shouldn't do that. That number varies whether you live in New York City versus live in Nebraska versus Europe or wherever. If you're in different parts around the world, it's going to be different. The point is there is a spot at which money is no longer helping reduce fundamental stresses and burdens. It's no longer buying that happiness. Now, what the research shows is that if you've reached that spot and you are unhappy, more money will not make you happier. If you have reached that spot and you are happy, more money will also not make you happier. So the point is that you should try to build financial wealth up to the point where that caps off. And then it's all about these other things in your life.
Right.
The problem is most people get to that point and then they think, okay, more money is going to make me happier. So they keep chasing. Their expectations keep rising. So what I talk about in the book is just this idea that expectations are your greatest financial liability. If your expectations are rising faster than your assets, you will never be happy. You will never feel rich. You'll never feel wealthy. So the point is that you need to develop an understanding of what your version of enough looks like. What does your enough life look like? The life where you feel you have enough financially. Because if you can place that into your conscious mind and stop allowing that kind of subconscious expansion of what that life and your future looks like, you can force it into being a rational move. You can force it into being something where you can actually calculate, you can make the decisions. Am I making a trade-off to my social wealth by trying to chase this new job or opportunity? Is that a trade-off I actually want to make, or should I not?
In a way, this is like bringing in one of the mindfulness and meditation practices of taking this detached outlook on all your forms of wealth and making that trade-off of what you want to, how you want to respond, being in that space between the same.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most important parts of the book is just recognizing that there are these different types of wealth and forcing that into your conscious mind so that when you make a decision, you think about all of them, not just one. Because previously, if you only have one, if someone offers you twice your current salary to go take a job, you jump at it, right? So, it's twice my salary, I'm going to go take that job. Now think about it a little bit more. Say that's going to require me to work twice as much. Say it's going to cause me to move away from all of the people that I care about. Say it's going to be a really boring job that I'm actually going to hate. Well, now I can think about, okay, my time wealth is certainly going to take a hit. My social wealth is definitely going to take a hit because I'm moving away from all the people I care about. My mental wealth, because I'm going to be working on things I hate, is going to take a hit. And my physical wealth, because I'm not going to have a lot of time and I'm going to be more stressed, is probably going to take a hit. So something that looked like a no-brainer on the old scoreboard now looks like a terrible move on the new scoreboard. And it allows you to now, it doesn't mean you're not going to take it, but it makes you think more clearly about that decision prior to going and doing it.
On a micro level, I often struggled with this question, and I still do. A lot of friends bring it up about living in Midtown Manhattan as compared to moving to Newport, New Jersey, because obviously the rents are much lower and you might pay a low amount of taxes. But I always make the case that if I start quantifying how much I'm saving in terms of mental health, in terms of not commuting every day, and the physical wealth as well, because commuting takes a lot out of you. You got to get home and then take a while to just de-stress. Just being within walking distance of every place I have to be, I feel like I'm happy to pay that premium for it.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. We have listed down all the 5 types of wealth, and hopefully you're going to take a more holistic approach towards this. I definitely have to pick your brains on your average day, your daily routines, right from when you wake up to when you go to bed. What are some different routines, frameworks you have adopted, small changes that people can start making, tweaks they can start making in their lives, that not only will they see the short-term benefits immediately, but if you continue with this routine over weeks and months and years, you will start seeing the benefits compound over time.
I think structure is the most important thing, especially for young people.
Okay.
Most people don't have a great awareness of how they're spending their time, and they don't have a great structure that is aligned with the future they're trying to create. So if I know, let's say I'm young and I'm like, I want to build some financial wealth. I want to build a stable foundation for my career and for my life over the next 10 years. Well, what are you actually doing on a daily basis to affect that future? You go ask someone that and they're like, well, go to my job, then I come home. Okay, well, there's a lot of time in a day when you're not asleep and you're not at a job. What are you doing during all those hours? What are you actually doing when you're at work? If you ask people to actually block out their day, take your 24 hours in a day. Let's say you're going to sleep 7 of them. Now, what are you doing with the remaining 17 hours? What is that time being purposed towards? Maybe you're at work for 8 of it. Okay, what's the remaining 9 hours? What are you spending that time doing? Are you, working on building a new skill? Are you working out to actually help your body? Are you spending deep time with people that you care about to build relationships? What are you actually doing that's trying to build towards that future? Normally, if you hold yourself a little bit more to the fire around how you're really spending your time, you'll find that you're wasting a lot of it. And sometimes time wasted is a good thing. Sometimes it's that decompression. It's important for your mental health. But other times, it's just that you didn't have an awareness of it. And so you're saying you have all these big goals and aspirations. Then you show me your calendar and it's a mess. You don't have a real structure. You don't have a consistency around the practices that are building towards that future. So holding yourself to the fire a little bit more, I have found is helpful. In terms of just daily practices, a couple of just kind of random things off the top of my head that have really helped me. One is a tiny journaling practice before bed. I never was able to journal consistently because in my mind, what journaling meant was sitting down for 30 minutes with a big notebook and writing all these beautiful thoughts. That was just too intimidating. I don't have time for that every single day. So I never got the benefits of journaling. what I did was I created something I call the 1-1-1 method, where you just write down one win from the day, 1 point of tension, stress, or anxiety, and then 1 point of gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
It takes like 2-3 minutes, and it immediately has this like sense of calm that comes over you before you go to bed. It forces you to recognize a win. So you give yourself credit for the thing that you're actually doing, that you did, whether it's small, like getting out of bed when you said, or big, like you got some promotion or you had some big win in your life. And then gratitude. You start to just actually force gratitude in your life. You find a level of happiness that you never knew existed. So that's one that has been a big improvement, life improvement for me. Another big one has just been grayscale mode on my phone. I find my phone way too addicting. Also, a bunch of my life and work is on my phone. I put my phone on grayscale mode for probably about 90% of the day now. And it's much less addicting. I spend less time on it, less time on all the apps. And it means I'm more present in conversations. I'm more present with the people that I'm around.
Very accessible tweaks that people can start making and start seeing the benefits of in their lives. In 2022, you interviewed a group of 80 and 90-year-olds and you asked them about insights from their rich lives and any advice for younger people. What was one of, or maybe some of the most powerful pieces of advice that you heard from them?
I think one of the most powerful pieces was an old woman who said, always remember that your track record for making it through your hardest days is perfect. And I come back to that a lot on bad days. Because when you are in the darkness, when you are in the struggle, it's very easy to lose sight of the fact that you've been there before and you've made it through. Every single time you've made it through. Because the present moment is hard to zoom out from. We in general have a very tough time doing that. And reminding yourself in those moments that you're going to make it through, that you've always made it through, and that it's always just a blip in the future, I just find really empowering.
I think that's a very powerful piece of advice. I want to talk to you about luck as well. Seneca had once said that luck is where opportunity meets preparation. In the book, Chance and Creativity, James Austin talks about 4 different types of luck. He says there's blind luck, luck from motion, luck from awareness, and luck from uniqueness. Can we linger on this? What are these different types of luck? What is in your control and what's actually luck?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is just that luck is not all created equal. And you can actually create lucky events in your life. Blind luck, that first type of luck, is the only true luck. These are like the acts of God, right? It's like where you're born, who you're born to, winning the lottery, like things that are truly out of your control. But most of luck is type 2, 3, and 4. And those are types of luck that you can actually create in your life. Luck from motion is like hustle luck. It's you're going out and you're actually creating collisions in the world. You're meeting people, you're connecting people, you're putting yourself into situations where lucky events can happen. It's very hard to get lucky sitting on your bed watching Netflix. It's much easier if you're out and about, if you're engaging with people, if you're interacting with people, going to the gym, doing things, meeting people, talking to people. Those are all ways to create luck. Awareness and uniqueness are both specific forms of luck where you've built a skill. You've built something about yourself that is attracting luck to you, or you're able to spot luck more easily. Again, both of those are examples of things you can control. I have much more luck now because I'm much more skilled. Things come to me. There's things that I would consider lucky previously, meeting people, interacting with people, but I wouldn't be in that room if I hadn't done a whole lot of work in the background to get there. And so for everyone out there, it's just this idea that you can create your own luck. You have to expand your surface area of lucky events, the things that can actually come in and collide with your life.
Increase your luck surface area. I love that. One final big question, then we start wrapping up. I have to ask you about the ship of Theseus. So for those who have forgotten, the ship of Theseus is a thought experiment that says if you have a really old ship, and you start replacing it one part at a time, at what point does it become a new ship? And you often bring up this analogy because in our bodies as well, every single cell gets replaced once every 7 years. So in 7 years, you're biologically a completely different person. And you say you have to also evolve, make sure that you're developing. So you reinvent yourself constantly. You don't stay the same person. I've often noticed that some people also overindulge in this to the certain extent that if you move to a new place, take up a new role, find a new set of friends, a lot of people actually end up assimilating too deeply into the culture that they often forget where they're coming from. And I feel like this is a challenging bit to walk about. Like while you are committed to this goal of reinventing yourself, you shouldn't lose track of where you're coming from, your core values. Do you think this is a challenge? Was it something you found challenging as well, or you were immediately able to compartmentalize the two?
No, I'm never able to compartmentalize things like that. I don't think anyone is. I think that's just a natural tension of life that you face. You're changing situations. Your identity is shifting. You're constantly adjusting physically as well as mentally. Yeah. And fundamentally, when I think about the ship of Theseus, what I come to is that it doesn't really matter. Because you are ever changing. You are literally just an ever changing creature in one way or another. And so attaching yourself to one specific identity is actually just leading to the tension and anxiety. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, feeling like, oh, I'm changing, or feeling like I'm not changing enough, or all of these things. It doesn't really matter. Harness and focus on the actions. Focus on the present. If there's one thing that I try to get across in all of my work and all of my writing, in the book included, it's that the action is where the gold is found. It's in the doing the thing, not in the reading the thing, not in the learning the thing, not in the talking about the thing. It's in doing the thing. So even like with my book, read my book, go do one thing. It doesn't matter. There's 1,000 things in the book that you could do. Take one of them and go actually act on it, and your life will change in some way. It's not that I think everything is so profound, but the one action convinces you that you have power. I mean, I fundamentally believe that the feeling of powerlessness, the feeling of being stuck in life, is because you don't feel like you can take an action and create an outcome. You can reassume that power by doing it, by taking a tiny action and seeing the outcome it creates in your life. If you do that, you've now reasserted yourself. You've taken back that power, and that has ripple effects into everything else you do in life.
There's a lot of power in actually acting upon it. In a way, it's similar to the Feynman technique of learning something, where you don't just deal with the ideas, you actually have some way of working on that idea, and that helps you retain it even further. Fantastic. Let's start moving into a closing question. Before we go there, I would love it if you can interpret what masterpiece you've built.
I wouldn't say masterpiece, but this is an interpretation of the rocks on the cover of my book. So
look at that. A shameless
You had
plug.
The colors. I was like, oh, this is perfect.
Yeah.
The five.
Surprisingly,
yeah.
the colors all match the brand
I know,
identity.
it's perfect.
How did that happen? Let's move into some closing questions. What are some books, movies, role models that have strongly influenced you in your life?
Books. When Breath Becomes Air is a book that I reread every single year. That has been a huge one in my life. Movies. Troy. Absolutely love. There's a quote about Troy in the book. Just love that one. And Interstellar, absolutely love as well. Sort of relates to the topic of Lux surface area, the planet that's sitting right on the edge of the black hole. Role models. My parents have been the two greatest role models in my life, and getting to observe them and how they operate and how they live and how they love has been a real blessing.
In 2014, when you graduated from college, you wrote a letter to yourself to read in 2024. If you had to write a letter to yourself 10 years from now, in 2034, 2035, what advice would you give yourself?
I think the number one thing would be that I am still the deeply committed, present, energetic father and husband that I am today. I think if I do that, everything else will fall into place.
I think that's good advice for future Sahil. Your name, Sahil, means the horizon or the end of the journey. In your book, you say, this book marks the end of my first journey, all made possible because I rejected the broken scoreboard and centered my life on the new one. You're a fan of this visualization exercise where you ask people to close their eyes and imagine their life, the life they would be living when they're 80 years old. I want to conduct a similar exercise with you today, but I want to tweak it slightly. I would like you to visualize a life after you're gone. How do you want to be remembered? What type of a legacy do you want to leave behind?
I would love if people thought of me as someone who shared with the world and shared love and shared compassion and shared ideas and wisdom. And that includes on my family level. It includes with the world. I think that is what I have a unique ability to do. And I think that is what I have a unique ability to be one of the best in the world at. And if there's anything I believe, it's that everyone out there has some unique gift. And our job is to find what that unique gift is and then share it. And if I can do that, if I can spend the rest of my life doing that, it'll be a life well lived.
I do think you have a gift for that, meaning able to digest all these different ideas, and some of them are quite complicated and nuanced, and be able to share them in such an easy, accessible format. That was one of the reasons your tweets hit off. That's the reason your newsletter works. And I'm sure that would be the reason this book also hits off. Last question. On your 32nd birthday, your parents gifted you a compass with the line inscribed inside, so you may always know where your true north lies. You often talk about living a purpose-imbued life, finding your dharma. So let's confront this loaded question head on. What is the meaning of life, Sahil Bloom? What is the purpose? Is there a purpose? How do you find it?
Oh, geez, that's heavy. I don't know how I would answer that. I think the purpose is to ultimately find joy and act in the service of others. And I think by acting in the service of others, you find the greatest happiness in yourself. And I have found that time and time again in my life. When I position actions in the service of other people, and giving and sharing and teaching and supporting and loving, that is where I feel the greatest joys in my own life. When I try to put myself first, I feel empty. And so I think more and more people should come to that and find that if they ground their actions in service of others, they will find those feelings of contentment and purpose.
I like it. Sahil, if people want to connect with you, if they want to find out more about you, they want to read the newsletter, read your book, what is the best way to find you?
I'm at Sahil Bloom on every platform. The book, you can find more at the5typesofwealth.com, or it's available anywhere books are sold. I am always in favor of supporting local bookstores. So go and buy it at your local bookstore.
Yeah.
You won't regret it.
You won't regret it at all. As someone who's read the book already, I think it was a fantastic book. Sahil, thank you so much. It was truly a privilege talking to you.
Thank you.